I'm Tim, and I'm glad for this opportunity to say, I love you. And thank you for your stewardship, for you welcomed me so warmly when I arrived 4 years ago lost. You prayed for me even before I was a member, when I had shoulder surgery and when my mother died. You teach my children, Jamie, Lauren, and Jordan, that they matter and that lives of grace are possible and worth pursuing. You work in countless ways to answer needs in the community, making a difference and making visible God's love. You invest your hard-earned money in this place, its people, and its purpose. And both the breaking of the bread at this table and the beautiful faces I see around this table each week help me recognize God. In these and many other ways, you've joined your actions with the actions of those who remain with this community forever in spirit. I've seen their pictures downstairs in the historical room. Have you been there? I first was there in your Sunday school class, Max, and I would stay after class, sometimes because I had gotten in trouble, but sometimes, sometimes just to look at the pictures. They're fantastic. I looked again this morning, going all the way back to 1912, some of these pictures, and probably further, that I haven't seen. And it's fun to look at those faces and to try to find the eyes and to imagine their stories. What kind of lives did they live, and how did they make their stewardship choices? I have no idea, but I'm convinced that their stewardship stories impact my life today. Because stewardship endures, and it swirls and combines and creates, in our case, a circle of love that not only expands geographically, but that extends through time. And so, as a new member, I'm grateful to everyone whose time, talent, prayers, voice, presence, and money built and still builds a Christian community that my family calls home. And it gives me great joy that my boys and I now join you as responsible stewards of what was, is, and will be a circle of love.
Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. Jesus tells the parable of the talents. For it is if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability, then went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more. In the same way, the one had 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more. His master said to him, Well done, my trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more. His master said unto him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you are a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reaped where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what is my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Have you ever worked on your family genealogy, or maybe watched one of those TV shows that delves into a person's family history? The TV shows weave together stories of a person's genealogy and DNA and help them connect to their family roots. One of my personal favorite shows is Dr. Henry Louis Gates' show, Finding Your Roots. Dr. Gates is a master at weaving together the family stories of 3 guests, revealing traits and histories that bind those individuals together. Sometimes people have surprises, and sometimes there's pain in learning about those family members whose actions are less than desirable. Family history connects people to their foundational stories and helps explain who they are. Biblical text connects us to our faith history, and there is a lot to learn. We have stories that make us happy and proud. We have stories that surprise us. And like Dr. Gates' guests, our faith history includes some stories that puzzle us or cause us pain. Now, I have to admit that I cringed a bit when I saw what today's text would be, because it's a story of the less than perfect side of humanity. I struggle with this parable because, quite frankly, the ending makes me pretty uncomfortable. To have a person cast out into darkness doesn't sound very Jesus-like, does it? Why would Jesus tell such a story? We know that God is a God of mercy and grace and unconditional love. So how do we resolve this? What's this parable really about? Well, that in itself can be a difficult question to answer. Part of the difficulty in parables is that they are very open to interpretation. Biblical commentators labeled the third slave from wicked and lazy to fearful. The talents were applied as money or as gifts and abilities. So which is right? Perhaps a little bit of all of them. In the scripture, Jesus is preparing the people for life after his crucifixion. He was setting some expectations by telling this story. We encounter a master who, before leaving on a long journey, gives 3 slaves a sum of money. There were no instructions on what to do with it. But that doesn't mean that an expectation wasn't in place. Each servant was given a different sum of money according to their ability. If there was no expectation, all the servants would just hide their money in the ground or put it in a clay jar. And then there would be no reason to tell this story. What if they all invested it in a bank? They would have earned interest, but that didn't use their ability. 2 slaves are somehow able to double the sum that they were given. Now, a talent in Jesus' day was money, a lot of money. In today's money, a talent would be worth well over $1 million. So to somehow invest that kind of money and to double it, that would have taken some risk. The first 2 slaves used their abilities, took a well-calculated risk, and doubled their money. No small wonder the master was pleased. But look into the story deeper. The master doesn't just give them a pat on the back and say, "Good job." The master says, "Enter into the joy of your master." And he said it to both of the slaves. The servant who doubled his 2 talents received the exact same reward as the one who doubled his 5 talents. This was not about money. This was about the servant's willingness to risk using their abilities, and in doing so, their results were absolutely amazing. The third slave becomes the focal point of the story when we learn that he simply buried the money and then returned it to the master in the original sum. The slave begins to cite all the reasons why he didn't realize any gains. The master was harsh. The master was a scoundrel. The slave was afraid. Now, some do say that the master confirms the slave's perception by saying, "You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter?" But the master knows that the servant is making excuses. I almost hear some sarcasm in that text. The slave thought it was about the money, but it wasn't. The reward was entering into the master's joy, becoming closer to the master. The master wanted the slave to use what he had given him, but the third slave was content to not take any action. He wanted to find a reason to not apply himself, use his ability, or take even the smallest of chances. Because of his choices, he was thrown into darkness. So what is the darkness? For many, this phrase conjures up notion that the servant was thrown into hell, where there would be weeping and gnashing of teeth. But I believe that we need to look at this from more than one perspective. After all, in the 8th chapter of John, Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." What is the opposite of light? Darkness. I researched the Greek word for darkness and found that the writer of Matthew used the same root word used in John. That word, skotos, does mean the opposite of light, but it can also mean the absence of spiritual light. I have to wonder if that's what Jesus was talking about. Have there ever been times when you felt far from God? I have. During those times, I felt a type of separation and estrangement, like my spiritual light was gone. As believers, those times of distance often coincide to times when we aren't taking action or doing activities and practices that keep us close to God. Maybe we forget to pray or call and check on someone. Maybe it happens when we feel we're too busy to do something, or if we don't participate in activity, it won't matter because we wouldn't make that big of a difference. I wonder if Jesus meant that disregard for that which God has given us, no matter how large or small, causes a type of separation. That each of us, in some way, are gifted by God, and with those gifts comes the expectation that we use them to do what God would have us do. I wonder if the absence of spiritual light is what the third slave experienced. You see, the third slave completely missed the point. And the master's reaction was because the servant completely blew off something that was very important, that which I believe Jesus was talking about all along. Jesus wanted the people to understand that while not all gifts are the same, each person has the opportunity to fulfill God's mission. That mission is to love God enough to help bring God's kingdom to earth, to love people enough to show the immense power of God's love and grace. Today's parable is a very human story. It tells us the story of the risk and courage that it takes to be faithful. It reminds us of the frailty of our humanity and, yes, the estrangement we can feel when we do not do as God asks. But it also calls us to consider how we live our faith. South Street has a rich history of helping others. In 1894, we provided a meeting place for the first Jewish religious service in Springfield. During the influenza epidemic of 1918, it was South Street that opened its doors and said, "Yes, we will help." We are the church who in 1927 ordained Miss Edna Link, who would go on to serve in the missionary field. Investment is in our DNA. We feed the hungry. We collect diapers for the diaper bank. We make health kits and school supply kits for Festival of Sharing. We've repaired homes after Hurricane Katrina and spent time with children living in orphanages. We are an integral part of the Interfaith Alliance. And we cannot forget that for 47 years, we have made and sold apple pies to raise money for mission and outreach. Teachers are upstairs right now, building faith foundations in our children and demonstrating what South Street is all about. Mission and service are who we are as a people and a church. Is what we do worth it? Does that bring a part of God's kingdom to earth? Absolutely. It is who we are. It is how we live faithfully, offering ourselves for God's good work. Does that sometimes mean taking risks? Yes, but always after prayer, study, and discernment. South Street's story is part of God's story that must continue. So how will you live your faith? And where in South Street's story will you be?